Drama unfolds. Bai Lu's family divided over whether to forgive Zhang Linghe. The hospital corridors still hummed with the low murmur of whispered conversations, the squeak of nurses' shoes, and the occasional beeping of machines echoing from behind closed doors. It was a place where life and death danced uncomfortably close, where every breath taken by the one you love mattered more than the world outside. But tonight, the sterile quiet of the ward was torn apart not by the machines, not by the doctors, but by the raw voices of a family fractured in half, standing at war over one man, Zhang Linghe. The storm after the crash. Bai Lu lay pale and fragile in her bed, still recovering from the terrifying car crash that nearly took her away. Though her eyes fluttered open from time to time, she remained silent, watching the chaos unfold around her like a ghost unable to intervene. Her mother, eyes red from days of crying, stood guard at her daughter's side like a fierce shield. She had already confronted Zhang Linghe in a fiery clash that left the hospital buzzing with gossip. And now, the matter had evolved beyond a personal grudge. It became a battle of loyalty, a test of love, and a question of forgiveness that divided even Bai Lu's own blood. He knew more than he told us, her mother snapped, her voice slicing through the tension in the room. How can we allow a man who hides the truth to stay beside my daughter? But before anyone could respond, Bai Lu's younger brother, Bai Chen, stepped forward. His fists were clenched, his eyes burning with the same protective rage, yet his words carried a different tune. "Mother, stop," he said firmly. "Linghe stayed here every single night. He hasn't eaten properly in days. You saw him crying when the doctors weren't sure she would make it. You saw him kneeling outside this very room. If that's not love, then what is it?" The words hung heavy in the air, like smoke too thick to breathe. The family rift. It was not just Bai Lu's mother and brother at odds, the entire family seemed torn down the middle. Some relatives agreed with the mother, whispering about how Zhang Linghe's presence was bad luck, how the crash happened under suspicious circumstances, how there must be more he wasn't saying. Others, like Bai Chen, believed that Zhang Linghe had already proven his devotion through sleepless nights, his desperate pleas to the doctors, and his refusal to leave even when Bai Lu's mother tried to ban him from the room. "He loves her," Bai Chen shouted during one heated exchange in the hallway. "If you can't see that, then maybe you don't understand what real love looks like." His uncle, however, fired back sharply. "Love doesn't erase mistakes. Love doesn't excuse lies. He should have told us everything from the start. Instead, he protected himself. Can you forgive that?" The argument became so intense that nurses had to intervene, begging them to lower their voices so they wouldn't disturb other patients. But how could they? How could anyone lower their voice when the stakes were this high? Zhang Linghe's silent plea. Throughout it all, Zhang Linghe stood outside Bai Lu's hospital room, listening to the words cut him down again and again. His face was pale, not from exhaustion alone but from the weight of guilt that clung to him like a second skin. He replayed the night of the crash over and over in his head. The sharp screech of tires. The haunting silence after impact. The sight of Bai Lu's fragile body slumped, motionless, beside him. He hadn't caused the accident, but there was something he hadn't revealed, something that gnawed at his conscience. And Bai Lu's mother knew it. That was why she couldn't forgive him. As the family continued their argument, Zhang Linghe finally walked in, his voice steady but trembling at the edges. "If my silence makes me a criminal in your eyes," he said, looking directly at Bai Lu's mother, "then so be it. But understand this, my silence was not for me. It was for her." He gestured to Bai Lu, still lying weak in her bed. "If I could take her place, if I could have been the one hurt that night, I would have done it without hesitation. All I ask is the chance to be here. To take care of her. To love her, even if it means carrying this blame forever." The room went dead quiet. Even Bai Chen's defiant posture faltered. Bai Lu's subtle intervention. And then, like a miracle, Bai Lu stirred. Her hand, fragile and trembling, shifted ever so slightly on the bed. The family gasped, rushing to her side, calling her name in urgent whispers. Her eyes fluttered open, and though her lips could barely form words, the faintest whisper escaped. "Enough, stop fighting." The words were soft, but they cracked through the chaos like thunder. Everyone froze. Her mother leaned in, tears streaming down her face. "Lua, Don't waste your strength. We are only trying to protect you. But Bai Lu, her gaze weak yet unyielding, slowly turned her head toward Zhang Linghe. The smallest tear slipped down her cheek. With what little strength she had, she raised her trembling hand, reaching for his. Her brother, her mother, the entire family, all of them stared as she gripped his fingers tightly. The message was clear, she wanted him there. The unfinished war. Even then, not everyone was swayed. While Bai Lu's gesture silenced the room momentarily, whispers resumed in hushed tones once she fell back into sleep. Some relatives murmured that she was too weak to know what was best. Others argued that her wishes should be final, that her voice was the only one that mattered. The debate raged on, quieter but no less intense, simmering beneath the fragile peace of her room. And Zhang Linghe? He stayed rooted to her side, clutching her hand like it was the only anchor keeping him from drowning. The division in her family might never heal, but one thing was certain, he would not leave. Not now. Not ever. A cliffhanger of forgiveness. The family's division loomed like a storm cloud over the ward, unresolved and growing darker with every passing hour. The question that hung in the air was one that had no easy answer. Could they forgive him? Would they forgive him? And if they didn't, would Bai Lu's love be enough to stand against her family's wrath? Only time would tell, but one thing was undeniable. This was no longer just a recovery from an accident. This was a battle for love, for truth, and for redemption. And the entire world was watching. The battle of forgiveness continues. The hospital lights flickered faintly, casting long shadows across the pale walls. For Bai Lu, every shallow breath was a victory, but for her family, every moment became a battlefield. The rift was no longer just words thrown in heated anger, it had become a full-blown war of hearts. Her mother sat at her bedside, clutching her hand like she could shield her from the world itself. Her face hardened with grief and anger, eyes never leaving Zhang Linghe, who sat silently across the room. The silence between them wasn't peaceful, it was the kind that crushed the air from everyone's chest. The mother's fury. Look at him, Bai Lu's mother whispered bitterly, her voice trembling. He hides his guilt behind those eyes. How can any of you trust him? Her words sliced like knives, and the relatives who agreed with her nodded quickly, eager to keep her fury alive. She's right, an aunt muttered. There's more to that crash than his saying. Why else would he stay silent? Zhang Linghe finally lifted his gaze. His voice was low, raw, and laced with fatigue. Do you think I don't blame myself every second of the day? Do you think I sleep at night without seeing her broken body in my arms? You want to hate me, fine. But don't mistake my silence for selfishness. It was her choice. She made me promise not to tell you. The room froze. Even Bai Chen, who had been defending him, turned wide-eyed. What promise? The shocking revelation. Zhang Linghe's lips trembled as he continued. She told me not to tell you what happened before the crash. She didn't want you to worry. She thought she could carry it alone. And his voice broke, I swore I wouldn't betray her trust. Even if it meant all of you would hate me. Gasps filled the room. The weight of his confession slammed against the family like a tidal wave. Bai Lu's mother shot to her feet, her chair clattering against the floor. You expect us to believe that? That my daughter, my precious girl, would make you keep secrets from her own family? You're twisting the truth to save yourself. Her voice cracked, but her eyes burned with unshakable rage. Bai Chen takes a stand. Mother, stop. Bai Chen snapped, louder this time. His face was flushed, his fists clenched at his sides. You keep painting him as the villain, but can't you see? He hasn't left her side. He's been suffering as much as we have. If Lu Jie really asked him to keep quiet, then he did it for her, not himself. His mother's face twisted with grief, torn between fury and disbelief. You're too young to understand. Love blinds you. It blinds him. And now you're letting it blind you too. But Bai Chen didn't back down. He stepped closer to Zhang Linghe, placing a hand on his shoulder, a gesture so bold it made the relatives gasp. I see a man who would burn himself just to keep her warm. If that's not worth forgiveness, then what is? The family fractures further. That single act split the family like shattered glass. One side, led by Lu's mother and older relatives, refused to let go of their suspicion. Forgiveness is weakness, an uncle spat. He failed her once. He'll fail her again. The other side, younger relatives swayed by Chen's words, began to see Zhang Linghe differently. Maybe he did it out of love, a cousin whispered. Maybe we've judged him too harshly. The argument erupted once again, voices clashing against one another like thunder. Nurses rushed in, begging them to quiet down, but the storm only grew louder. It wasn't just about Zhang Linghe anymore, it was about loyalty, about pride, about who truly had the right to decide Lu's future. Zhang Linghe's breaking point. Finally, after what felt like hours, Zhang Linghe rose to his feet. His face was pale, his eyes red-rimmed, but his voice was steady, almost eerily calm. If forgiveness is too much to ask of you, he said, then I won't beg for it anymore. But understand this, I will not leave her side. Even if you drag me out of this room, I will find a way back. Because I love her more than my own life. He dropped to his knees before Lu's mother, his hands pressed against the cold hospital floor. Hate me, curse me, strike me if you must, but don't deny me the chance to take care of her. Don't make me break the promise I made to her. Tears welled in the eyes of several relatives. Even Chen swallowed hard, struggling to hold back emotion. But Lu's mother remained unmoved, her lips pressed into a thin, bitter line. Love doesn't erase betrayal, she said coldly. The whisper in the night. Hours later, when the family had dispersed into the waiting area, Lu stirred once more. Her eyes opened, glassy but aware, and she found Zhang Linghe still seated beside her, head bowed in exhaustion. Her weak fingers reached out, brushing against his sleeve. His head shot up instantly, eyes flooding with relief. Lua, he whispered, choking on her name. Her lips barely moved, her voice so faint it was almost a breath. Don't fight, for me. A single tear slid down her cheek as she closed her eyes again. Zhang Linghe's heart shattered. She didn't know how divided her family was, how torn apart they had become. Or maybe she did, and her fragile plea was her way of trying to piece them back together. But outside the room, whispers carried on. Lu's mother sat stiff in the waiting area, her face cold as stone. To her, Lu's whispered plea meant nothing. Forgiveness was not so easily given, not when she believed Zhang Linghe still carried secrets.